Hi and good evening, everyone. So we are live and it's Wednesday, 11 p.m. CT here in Germany. I'm really sorry for the delay. I wanted to do the live like 1 hour earlier, but unfortunately we were quite busy working on a presentation for an important meeting tomorrow. So I had to prepare some slides and therefore I had to delay my live. So I'm sorry for that, but that's how consulting usually is. Sometimes it's hard to plan your life besides work. So I'm sorry again for the delay, but nevertheless, now with full energy, the live now. Cool. So today we have a cool topic. We will talk about the 5 biggest challenges that I think young management consultants usually have, or that certainly I had when I started out in management consulting. And if you already are in management consulting, then you maybe can write in the chat what you think what the biggest challenges are, or maybe what your personal biggest challenges were or currently are in management consulting. So obviously I'm interested in that as well. But I will share like my personal 5 biggest challenges when I started out in management consulting, and also share some more personal stories about some learnings that I had and some challenges that I faced during my career. Okay, cool. As always, if you have any questions, then please just write them in the chat. As always, I will go through the content first and answer the questions afterwards. But please feel free to write a lot of questions in the chat. It's always more fun if you guys interact with me. So that is not only a monologue, but more like a conversation and dialogue. Cool. But with that being said, let's do it. Let's start. Okay. So I was asked on Instagram, what if I could talk about the biggest challenges as a management consultant. So last week, or it was actually yesterday, I sent out a request to you guys to make some proposals for topics I can talk about in my lives. And one question was if I could talk about the biggest challenges in management consulting. And yes, of course, I would love to do that. So what I will do is to share my personal 5 biggest challenges that I had. And let's start with the first one. So the first one is the biggest challenge actually that I had at the very beginning was the communication, or the ability to communicate very complex ideas. And this was a very big challenge. And the reason is the following. So usually if you start out in management consulting, then you focus on all the analysis, you focus on all the detailed stuff, and you focus only on the quality part of actually the analysis. Because there's a reason for that, especially at the beginning. This is kind of your job, what you usually do. But the entire analysis, as good as the analysis might be, it doesn't help you if you are not able to communicate your ideas. And I remember one situation, so it was like my first project that I had, or probably it was the second project, but I had to develop a business case. And I know I worked through endless nights to prepare a model, and I had the chance to present my business model or my ideas and to the management board of the company we worked for. And what I did was, I was so much into detail and I knew all of the numbers and by heart, and it was such a great concept that I developed. But the problem was, when I presented my ideas to the management board, I made a huge mistake. Rather than telling a kind of story, only doing high level information and try to entertain the people, I did quite the opposite. I jumped immediately into the details because I wanted to show how great my analysis was and how much attention I paid to all the details. But the problem is that usually your clients, they are not interested in all the details. They simply are not. Maybe they have sometimes very specific questions, but for most of the time, they only want to hear about your high-level ideas, and they want to challenge your high-level ideas. Yes, there will be some deep dives, but in, let's say, 80% of the cases, you will have to convince them by telling stories and by communicating very complex ideas in a very simple way. And for me, especially at the beginning, this was certainly one of the biggest challenges that I had to face. because it's not very easy. You need some time to learn how to narrow complex data down into one or two main points that you actually can make and that you can kind of visualize. Okay, so for me personally, the biggest challenge number one was the ability to communicate, or was the communication of complex ideas. The second biggest challenge that I had, and that I actually still have, is the management of various stakeholders. Okay, so as you probably know, as a management consultant, you work in an internal consulting team. Okay, and even there you have several stakeholders. You have like experts, you have like your project team, you have the project leader, you also have the partner, and then obviously you have more stakeholders on the client side. You have like the CEO, you have the operational guys, you have like the middle management. And each of those guys has different interests, and they all want you to consider their interests and to work for them. Okay, so for example, your teammates obviously want that you support them, okay, that you help them whenever you can. Your project leader wants you to get your tasks done as quick as possible. The partner always wants to sell more projects, okay, so his only focus is on selling. Then the operational guy on the client side, he always wants to know all the details, and he wants to be kind of involved in every stage and challenge your detailed number. Then the middle management usually fights for power, okay, in every project, and the senior management or the executives, they always only have the main goal in mind, and they either want to reduce costs or increase revenue. So as you see, there are many stakeholders, and you have to know how to deal with each of them. And this is, especially at the beginning, very, very difficult, and can be very, very challenging, okay? Because you have obviously to interact with each of those guys in a very, very different way. And this is something that I was struggling at the beginning a lot with, okay? So this was kind of very difficult for me, and it still is, because client management and stakeholder management, this is something that simply needs time. Like usually if you are a project manager, or if you do the partner track, this is kind of the level where you really master that skill, and where the stakeholder management becomes kind of the core skill for you, okay? But especially as a young consultant, this can be very challenging. So this was challenge number 2, managing different stakeholders. So I definitely had to learn it. Then challenge number 3 is the management of emotions. And let me explain what I mean by that. So when you are in management consulting, you will most definitely face a lot of challenges, okay? Some of them I describe now, but you will also see a lot of stress. You will kind of have difficult behavior of your teammates sometimes, but mostly from the client side. There will be a kind of a very high workload. And let me tell you a story. So, and this is like a very, very typical situation in management consulting. And this is one of the most crucial situations where you need to be able to manage your emotions, okay? And this happens like all the time. Usually as a consulting team, we work on slides or on a very important presentation for usually if it's a very important concept, then obviously preparing a slide deck can take some time. And once you come to the final meeting where you have to present a slide deck, usually you do some revision rounds and feedback loops with the client or with senior stakeholders. And this is like what usually always happens, or can happen sometime, is that you put a lot in a lot of work into the preparation of the presentation, but then like 2 or 3 days before the meeting, they kind of destroy your concept and you have to do it all over again. And kind of imagine if you took like 2 or 3 weeks, and if you kind of stayed up very late, if you worked really hard to prepare a presentation, and you are so close to the goal of presenting your concept and kind of getting this workload done, and then shortly before the end, the senior management comes and tells you the concept doesn't work and that you have to do it all over again. But this time you don't have like 2 or 3 weeks, you only have 2 days to do it all again. And you can ask every consultant, this happened to probably every one of them. And these are the situations where you have to manage your emotion. because yes, of course it sucks, like if you put in all the work and if the client comes to you and says you have to do it all over again and you only have like 2 days. Of course this sucks, and of course you are angry, and of course the last thing you want to do is to work for that kind of client because you're so angry and so kind of disappointed. But these are the times where you definitely need to have a great emotion management, because if you can manage your negative emotions of course, and we all understand it, if you cannot manage those negative emotions at the moment, your work performance will suffer and you will most certainly make any mistakes. The quality will not be as high as it could be. And this is definitely something that you don't want to have, okay? So one of the biggest challenges that I had, I kind of improved a lot in that area, but actually I still have it, is to manage your emotions, and especially the negative ones, obviously, okay? And I think this is very important for young consultants to understand, and very often they underestimate that, how important great emotion management actually is in management consulting. Because at the end of the day, we are a service industry, don't forget that. Imagine that you go to a very expensive restaurant and that you have a waiter that isn't in control of his emotions, and that he kind of, where you feel that he has some negative feelings against you. You don't want that. You would leave the restaurant, and it's the same in consulting. If the client feels that you have some kind of negative emotions towards him, then of course, this is very, very bad. And don't forget that especially at the beginning, your client can not only be external, the client can also be internal, okay? So think of your partner or your project manager also as a client. And obviously you also don't want to show any kind of negative emotions towards your internal teammates, okay? So challenge number 3 is to manage your emotions. And believe me, this is really, really crucial. The biggest challenge, number 4, is to have a work-life balance. And I know this is kind of obvious, but nevertheless, I think it's important to highlight. So when I had my first strategy consulting internship, it was for 12 weeks, so 3 months. And we had a running gag that each intern in a company over this 12 weeks gains on average about 5 kilograms of body weight, okay, because of the bad kind of exercising routine, because of all the traveling, because of all the junk food that you eat. And when I started my internship, I said no way, I do a lot of sports and I have a healthy kind of diet. But I lost my bet, and actually I also gained I think it wasn't 5 kilograms, but it was at least 4 kilograms. So I gained a lot of body weight. And I felt quite uncomfortable with that. And at that moment, I decided, okay, I don't want to have that again if I become a kind of new hire and work as a actual management consultant. So, but this is a very big challenge. And I see many senior colleagues or even, colleagues on my level, on the senior consulting level or project manager level, who kind of really, are kind of getting out of shape, are or having kind of difficulties with their private relationships. And this is very clear. If you work 60 to 80 hours every week, of course it's difficult to find time for your sports routine. Of course it's difficult to find time to build relationships or to have great experiences. But that's a reason why it's so important to have an active management of your work-life balance in management consulting. And I can assure you that this was definitely one of the biggest challenges that I had when I started in management consulting. Okay, so this is challenge number 4. This is to have a proper work-life balance. And then last but not least, the 5th biggest challenge that I had as a junior consultant was dealing with failures and setbacks. And if you follow me for a while, then you probably know that at least in my company, I was on a kind of promotion fast track. So I was the fastest promoted person in my company over the last, some years, right? And I don't say that to brag, right? Or to flex, but I say that because you cannot imagine how many failures and setbacks I had, okay? And with failure and setbacks, I mean receiving very negative feedback, kind of doing a lot of mistakes, like doing mistakes in the Excel model, like having mistakes on my slides, like blowing up a presentation that I had. I even got almost kicked out of a project by the client. I mean, and I'm saying that because, I mean, although you are successful in management, or you can, you know, nevertheless, I mean, what I want to say is that even if you are successful in management consultant, and even if you consider yourself a good management consultant, failure and setbacks are just part of the game, okay? So better get used to it. So what you need is to have the ability to deal with those setbacks and with those failures, because the job as a management consultant is designed to push you towards your limits, okay? So it's kind of obvious that at some point you will fail, but it's important that you don't get kind of desperate and that you don't get kind of, demotivated and start self-doubting yourself. No, it's important that you accept failure and setbacks just as a part of the process, okay? And for me, this was certainly the biggest challenge that I had, because it was so hard to understand for me, because I was like this very ambitious, very driven, very hardworking guy. And for me, having a failure or a setback was almost non-acceptable. So it was very difficult for me, at the times when I received negative feedback or when I kind of blew up the presentation. It was very, very difficult for me to deal with that situation. But what I learned, as I just said, is that I have to accept it as a part, and I have to accept it as opportunities to grow. And once you kind of understand this, it becomes much more easier, and you're not afraid of failure anymore, because you just accept it as a part of management consulting. Okay, so to summarize, my 5 learnings, the first one is, or the 5 biggest challenges that I had in management consulting. The first one is to learn how to communicate complex ideas. The second is the management of various internal and external stakeholders. The third is to manage my own emotions. The fourth is to keep a healthy work-life balance. And the fifth is dealing with failure and setbacks. So if you have any questions about the topic or any off-topic questions, then please write now in the chat and I will answer them. Maybe one remark. So most of you will probably ask yourself, so why I didn't mention kind of building presentations or kind of working in Excel models or kind of doing or learning about all the management stuff. So the reason is that the difficult part of management consulting is usually not the hard skill part. Okay, so the difficult part is not to learn about Excel. The difficult part is not to learn how to build slides. And it's not about to learn about management, because those are things that are easily learnable. Okay, so just take a course about Excel modeling. Practice to do presentations, read books about management. So this is very easy to cover. But what's very difficult are those parts that you just have to learn by experience, okay? And that's the reason why my personal biggest challenges were mainly like soft skills oriented and not very hard skill oriented, okay? So this as a final remark. Okay, cool. So I will go through the chat now. If you have any questions, then please write now in the chat. But I see that the chat was kind of inactive today. Maybe you are also very tired, like I am. Okay, cool. Then if you don't have any questions, it was such a pleasure for me to do this live today. I think this was a very cool topic. I hope that I could bring you some value. If you have new suggestions for new topics, then please write me a direct message as always. And don't forget that I do a live tomorrow, obviously at 10 p.m. CT, also on Friday usually a bit earlier. And we will have a live Q&A session for like an hour on Saturday. Okay, I received a question. I will answer that one. What's the best way to do scenario planning? Wow, okay, that's a very, very complex question. Okay, so the basis of scenario planning, it's very easy, okay? So basically, like the first step is obviously that you write down all the scenarios, okay? So let's assume that you do a business case. So that's like a very typical consulting task. So let's say you do a business case. Then you usually have like 3 scenarios, okay? It's the management case, it's the worst case, and it's the best case. So like the management case is like, if your assumptions are like, you would assume them to be, then it's management case. Then the worst case is obviously, if everything goes wrong, what do the numbers look like? In the best case is okay. When the environment is pretty good, the market environment, then this would be the best case, for example. Okay, so the best possible way. So the step number one, if you do a scenario analysis, is obviously that you define the parameters or kind of the assumptions for the scenarios. Okay, so this might be like management case is your cost or your revenue kind of increases by 5%, and then you say, okay, the worst case is revenue would even decrease by 5%, and best case would be to increase by 15%. Okay, so this means step one is that you kind of define the assumptions. And that's actually kind of the biggest part of scenario planning, okay? Because usually you have to decide how much you get into detail with all of the sensitivity stuff, okay? Because, the question is, are you doing a management best case and worst case only for one parameter, like for example revenue, or are you also doing it for like cost positions, or you can make it very complex, okay? So this is a very important and very crucial step to define kind of the assumptions and parameters of your three scenarios, okay? And this is where you have to put in a lot of work and where you have to align with the client, okay? So that's very important, and that's step number one. And then at the end, actually, step number two is just to run the sensitivity analysis. So this might be that in your model, for example, you kind of calculate, you usually have an assumption tab, then you have the analysis tab that you play in with that you play around with the assumptions, and that is the analysis part. And then the third part is obviously to present it. And this is only like a visual topic. Okay, so again, to summarize, it is a very complex topic. If you have further questions, then please write me a direct message, and I will try to maybe make an episode about that. But then I have to prepare it, okay? But the short version is that step number one is define the assumptions. This is the most important step. Then run the model, and finally do the presentation. Okay, I see there was another question. Okay, off topic. You said in another stream that good grades are very important regardless of the course of study. What about soft skills and experience? Okay, so the thing about grades is if you want to get into management consulting, then as always, the easy way is to go to a target university, be in the top 5% and have good practical experience, okay? So, this is kind of the standard answer, because this is just the most simple way. But, so I personally, I never was the best student, okay? So at the end I had good grades, obviously, but I was never kind of the best student in my class, okay? I also, you probably know that before I studied management, I was a musician, okay? So also I have not the typical flawless CV that most people have who are working in strategy consulting, okay? And I had to compensate for my kind of weaknesses, okay? And I compensated it with a lot of practical experience and extracurricular experience, okay? So as I said, I was very busy in consulting clubs. I was very busy doing kind of working student positions and intern positions. So that's how I built or put a lot of focus outside or besides my grades on developing those soft skills, okay? And obviously, it's important that you are able to kind of show or, make the recruiter understand that you have those kind of soft skills, okay? So I would go for, obviously, the more internships you did, the better it is, okay? So if you had like 3, 4, 5 internships in, renowned companies or in consultancies, yes, then people believe that you have good consulting soft skills. It's the same like if you, go to a student club or are engaged in a sports club, for example, or if you have a certain hobby that you do very passionately, okay? So these are the ways how you can show your soft skills, okay? So I would go for internships, student clubs and like sports clubs or hobbies or so. Okay, so these are usually kind of the three buckets where you can prove that you have those skills. Yeah, that's my answer. Okay, and then of course you have to kind of convince in the interview. Good. Are there any more questions? Then please write them now in chat. And Norman, I hope I answered your questions. Otherwise, please just write me a direct mail and I will answer the question in more detail. Good. Then, if there are no other questions, then I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for this nice live session, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow 10 p.m. CET. I hope that tomorrow I will be on time. Now I have to go to bed because tomorrow I have to get up very early again to finalize the slide deck. And yeah, it was fun with you as always. And I hope you have a great day or great evening. I'm sorry. And I hope you have a great rest of the week. And I'm looking very forward to talk to you tomorrow. Okay, guys. Okay, see you tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Bye.